Hey guys, Jeff Aiello here, Talk of the Hill and the Talk of the Hill podcast. We've got another good one for you today. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a while, and we finally taped it last week, and we're going to play it for you guys now. And it's going to be sort of in place of, not in place, but I just wanted to let you know that American Grown, My Job Depends on Ag. The last 2 weeks we've done episodes on the Creek Fire 5 years after, really looking at the issues of forest management and response to fire, and what did we learn? What are we doing differently? And I say we in the royal we sense, like what is the Forest Service doing? What's CAL FIRE doing? What are we as homeowners and cabin owners and property owners in the mountains doing to better prepare our property and the forest for fire, and how that all trickles down into agriculture here on the Central Valley floor. And so those 2 episodes, if you haven't watched them, get over to Valley PBS and their YouTube channel is really a good place to do this. Go to the Valley PBS YouTube channel, click on American Grown, all of our shows will come up, and watch those 2 episodes we did the last 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks, American Grown is going to be preempted for some fundraising that Valley PBS is going to be conducting. So get over there and help Valley PBS if you can. I always tell people, man, it's just like Netflix. It's just like any of these other streaming services. Help Valley PBS become a member. Searching for the word there. Become a member do $20 a month. Do $20 a month. We get enough folks doing that, it's really going to help Valley PBS out and continue this awesome and also free service that they provide. They're providing the service for free, and so it's really hard to hit people up for money when the thing that they're already giving is free, but we need to be there for them. We need to support Valley PBS just like you would any other streaming service, and I'd appreciate it personally if everybody could jump in there and help out. I donate every year to Valley PBS, and I think you guys should too if you can. And before we get started with our special guest today too, I want to talk a little bit about a company that's been a big supporter of mine, of Jill and I for a long time, and of Talk of the Hill, and that's Valley Air Conditioning and Repair in Fresno. This is a company I can personally vouch for. Valley Air has been serving families here in the Central Valley for more than 56 years, and it's a true 4th generation, locally and family-owned business. My longtime friends, Toby and Brian Biglione, run the company today along with their family, and they've built a reputation the old-fashioned way. One customer at a time, mostly through word of mouth. What I appreciate about Valley Air is there are no gimmicks and no commissioned sales pressure. You see that a lot in other air conditioning companies today. That commission-based sales thing is not great for the consumer, and you don't have to worry about that when you choose Valley Air Conditioning. They are just known for their honest pricing, experienced technicians, and leadership that's hands-on and committed to doing the job right. They've won the People's Choice Award for Best AC Company in Central California more than anyone else, more than I can remember actually. And they're also big supporters of the work we do, including Outside Beyond the Lens and American Grown. So if you're looking for a company you can truly trust, give Valley Air Conditioning and Repair a call. Proud sponsors of Talk of the Hill. All right, hey everybody, Jeff Aiello here, Talk of the Hill podcast, and I'm looking forward to this one today because I've gotten to know this next guest, over the last couple of years, and he's got a High Sierra Lake named after him, I think. And he's kind of a legend. At least I like to tell that story. Dr. Alan Clyde is here. Hey, thanks for being with me today, man.
Oh, you bet. I wouldn't miss this. Fun.
This is going to be fun. For the 3 people who don't know who you are out in the mountain area up there, tell us real quick, who you are, what you've been doing professionally, your ties to the Sierra. Give me the unpack right now.
Sure. I'm born and raised here, and I have medical practice in Clovis as podiatrist, foot doc, in Clovis for 43 years, right on the hospital campus, and retired about 6 years ago. But all through that, back in 1980, I got the horse packing station at Dinky Creek, Wishon, and Courtright Lake. And so my wife, Deborah, and I have been doing that for 45 years. And we've taken in or out, you add it together, over 20,000 people into the wilderness.
That's crazy.
And then also in 95, we got a cattle operation. In fact, we got it from Bonner Sample. Do you remember Captain Scott Sample?
I do.
The helicopter, his dad.
Yeah.
So I got it from.
I mean, that's the Sample family that's been here for 150 years.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was in their name, family name, since like 1880s until us.
They're one of the first families to settle this area.
They wagon trained it out here.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And so anyway, we've been running, and I'm the only, Deb and I are the only operation that has a pack station and a cattle operation in the Sierra National Forest.
Wow.
We've been doing both for 30 plus years, and 45 on the packing side. And it's so we get the rare opportunity to see the combination of the both operations.
Yeah.
Up there.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a very close, very well-informed view of the mountains, of the Sierra.
And I look at it through a lens of education, because I've been on Clovis School Board as well as I'm on the County Board of Education now, and I still am, and I've been elected and re-elected 8 times.
Yeah.
All in East Fresno County.
Yeah.
And so I look at it as everything I do every day is a learning experience.
Right. That's a good way of looking at it. It's a good way of doing it.
And then I wrote 2 books on it.
Yeah. And the books are cool, and we'll talk about the books as we get to know you a little bit more. I can't, and thank you for bringing me a couple of copies too, because I got something to read on the plane now. Let's start. I mean, we're going to cover a lot of stuff here, and we're going to end up. I think most of the discussion will probably end up with, the themes of what we've been doing on American Grown. My Job Depends on Ag the last couple of weeks, which has been this Creek Fire 5 years later look. But before we get into that, Alan, let's talk about. Since we're talking about the mountains and the Creek Fire, how did the Creek Fire impact you? Take me through your experience with the Creek Fire as it happened that weekend back in 2020.
Yeah, it was in around Labor Day weekend,
yeah.
and we're just sitting at Dinky Creek, looking up and seeing a plume of smoke coming out from the northwest from us, and we thought, just another fire, but it just mushroomed like an atomic. And then all of a sudden, ash started falling, and we know this thing's not going to lay down. It's going to keep cooking, and it cooked fast. Now, I felt way sorry for the people over at Huntington and over in that area in Big Creek, because they were right in the eye of it. But it didn't actually get to us.
But you knew how bad
I knew how bad it was, and I knew
yeah.
this thing was going to blow, and it did up to 360,000 acres.
Yeah.
And then obviously people have been up the hills going skiing or whatever, and they during the summer also, and they see the devastation and the hard burn.
Yeah.
We're not talking about ground hug here. We're talking about hard burn, killing every tree, and they're all standing sticks. And worse too is that it kills the soil.
Yeah, it turns it to glass.
Deep. And to where whatever microorganisms are going on, they're dead.
A lot of people don't realize this, or maybe they do. A lot of folks that I talk to, they don't seem to realize this, but it burned so hot that in a normal fire, you have high, medium, and low intensity rates, right? Even in high intensity, a lot of times there's some beneficial to that, right? It'll unlock some seed pods and cones of different species of trees. In this fire, the Creek Fire was so hot that there were no seedlings over thousands of acres of forest. It just nuked it. There was nothing. It went beyond. And that tells you something, doesn't it?
That tells you a lot, because then it glasses over the surface. And then when water does come, you think that, oh, good, it's going to soil down. No, that water, that's a hard surface, and that water jetsons right off the top of that surface.
Yeah.
And silts up the creeks, and on down we go. So it unless it's churned up, it really is a detrimental effect on so many different aspects of the ecosystem.
Yeah, it is, and what you're talking about is hydrophobic soils, and that's what happens when basically the sand crystals in the top layers of the dirt get so hot they melt, they turn into glass, and they melt, and you get this real thin layer of almost like glass over the soil, and like you're saying, the water can't get into the ground and soak into the water table, and so it's all of these effects that come from poor forest management for decades, right?
100%. And remember, I started in 1980, so commercially.
Yep.
So I've seen this forest evolve in a degraded march since then.
Okay, let's talk about that, because you are one of the people. There's a lot of folks that have been up on the mountain for a long time that know what you're about to say, and then there's a lot that come from the city to the mountains and they don't understand this, or our friends in the cities that are. They have the voting power. Mm-hmm. We need them to know this. You guys need to know this of what you're about to hear. Take us through the changes that you saw, let's say from kind of the heyday of the timber industry in the late 70s going into the 80s, and how it started to change?
Sure. At the beginning, you referring to my friend John Mount, and I reflect what he saw too, and that's we're looking at 75 to 100 trees per acre. You can see it, you can see through it, and there's wildlife bounding all through it, to the point where you're getting 600, 700, 800 to over 1,000 trees per acre, and you can't see diddly.
Which is what we have now.
And the problem is they're all small, spindly trees,
Yeah.
because they're all competing not only just for the same water, but they're competing for the same nutrients in that soil.
Absolutely.
So you'll see a little tree, and it can be 30 years old, but it's only 5 to 6 inches in diameter, and that tells you've got a sick system.
Yeah, it does. And really we saw this, I mean, again, I hate to beat this old tired horse, to use a horse analogy next to a horseman.
Yeah, be nice on horses, okay?
Yeah, be nice to the horses. But, when you hear people like me or people like you, or there's a lot of folks around here that, get on this soapbox about ripping into environmentalism, right? And it's not something that we do. It's not something that we do easily. It's like, but there's a reason behind it, people. Like, when you really get into looking at the history and the evolution of the problem that is right now facing the Sierra Nevada and all up and down the mountain ranges of the West, but we're just talking about the Central Sierra right now, in that we had fire was always part of the ecosystem ever since Native Americans 20, 30, 40,000 years ago started to become.
And it wasn't just the Native Americans. Think about it. They couldn't control lightning strikes. And so many of these fires hit with lightning strikes, they just moved camp.
Right.
And they moved around the mountain and let it burn out. And the next year went back, and they had a wholly different very food-rich ecosystem to come back to. They
Correct.
loved fire. They lived with fire. That was part of their culture, and it still is.
Yeah, right. And so they learned from that.
Exactly.
And then they did their own prescribed burnings. They would in the fall, when they knew the weather was right for it, they would put fire on the ground and let it crawl, and they'd come back. You go look at old photographs of Yosemite Valley. There are no pine trees. It's large black oaks, which are some still there, but there's very few pine trees. It's open land. It's great for grazing. It's great for wildlife proliferation and for harvesting the acorns like they used to do back then. And now you have, and not that one's bad and one's not. Not that a conifer forest is a bad thing, but I guess what the point I'm trying to make here is that we've seen this decline. I call it a decline in the health of the forest when you're talking about thousands of trees per acre. And you're talking about the stress that puts on those trees, which then opens up to situations like the bark beetle, and we get these. Basically, you get this massive fuel load. I guess what I'm trying to draw this to, Dr. Clyde, is that fire has always been part of the ecosystem of the forest, whether it was caused by lightning or it was used by Native Americans. In the mid to late 1800s, we developed the means to fight fire, right? Firefighting became a thing. And we then started putting out those lightning fires, those beneficial fires. We started putting them out because we had the technology to do so, and we were protecting the resource, which was timber, to grow, to build a growing West. Right? We needed wood to build things. And so we said, hey, we're not going to we didn't fully understand fire ecology, I don't think, as a civilization then either. And so we put out these fires, and we replaced the good that fire did with an industry called the logging industry or the timber industry, because we were removing a certain amount of board feet every year from the forest as the forest was kind of growing that same amount of board feet. People need to realize this. Logging is a science. We understand. They take measurements that when they used to be able to log. We used to know in logging how many board feet a particular area of forest would grow in a year, and then we would harvest roughly about that amount. It's amazing that lumberjacks and loggers were actually pretty smart guys.
They knew how to balance it.
Yeah, they knew how.
Because they knew it was regenerative, and they obviously, if they overcut, they're going to cut themselves out of their food, their wood source, and they're going to be out of business. So they knew where to go and where to stop. And a lot of this was done on the land that you could get equipment to.
Correct.
And the real steep vertical 45-degree pitch stuff, they had to let nature take its course and burn that. But they had buffer zones because of what they logged.
Right.
And that kept things contained.
Now, we've got this. You and I have painted this beautiful picture of balance in the forest. We've got healthy forests. Yes, there was clear cutting. Yes, that sucks. We shouldn't have done that. This is what I'm talking about. There is an evolution of intellect and understanding of our natural resources. We didn't always get it right. I mean, we over harvested whales, for crying out loud, in the ocean. And we figured out, maybe that's not the coolest thing to do in the world. So we evolved past that. But in this situation, we evolved to a point to say, hey, not only is clear cutting look ugly, but it's not necessarily the best way to grow for regenerative purposes, for elongating the profiteering of the forest. And so what happens is that the Endangered Species Act passes in the 70s, Nixon signs it, and we go into this protective mode of our history. And then the spotted owl comes along, right? And that issue comes along. And logging takes a direct hit, does it not?
Absolutely. It took such a hard hit that they all had to shut down.
Yeah.
And they shut down to where then there was no place to take the logs. And it used to be 2 or more sawmills per county all up and down the Sierras. Now we really just have 2, Terabella and Sonora.
Right.
And so these loggers have to haul them all the way there. Can you imagine the fuel costs and air pollution involved with that? But
Right.
that's the only thing that they have available. Now, tomorrow, if we put in a log sawmill, it'd starve out because there's not enough marketable logs left in the forest to sustain the 30 million board feet that it takes to run a sawmill.
Right.
And that was something that even Tom Schultz, chief of the Forest Service, did in his testimony to Congress about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's a scary but solid fact. That's it. So we got to think of something else.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like we went too far again, and I don't necessarily just blame. If I'm going to be fair, the same level of blind ignorance to how to manage a forest on the logger side, which we had, the environmentalists countered it with their own blind ignorance and not seeing far enough down the road of what was going to happen if you quit the man-made process of thinning the forest through timber, but you're still putting out fires. So you go back to this triangle. Fire was normal. Then we came along and put out fires. But the good that fire did, we replaced with timber. Well, when you remove the timber industry and you still put out the fire, you're left with the third spoke in that wheel, which is overgrowth. Rampant, heavy overgrowth. You're no longer thinning. You're no longer removing fuels from the forest in the timber industry, and you're continuing to put out the lightning fires that could help thin the forest because you have communities and you have holdings and properties now living in and around the forest. And so now 30, 40 years goes by, and we have this choked, heavily overgrown forest that when it does catch on fire, like the creek fire, it goes nuclear.
Yeah. And so my focus now is not who to blame, who to get a rope to hang and all that. Let's move forward.
Okay.
And that is where I'm focused. And it's the type of thing that there's so multiple tools that we need to use, of which logging really is a small part.
Yeah.
Because of no market value left
Right.
on the logs. And that you have to supplement the logging operation so much to do extra stuff for thinning. They have to thin a forest to get to a tree that they can market.
Isn't that something? That's true. Yeah,
That's true. And then then we can get into the slash piles that they leave that you showed.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit,
Sure.
because you have some personal experience with that.
Absolutely.
So in episode the 50, I call it episode 505 because I'm the producer and that's the stupid code that we have for it. But in Creek Fire Part 2, 5 years later, Part 2, we introduced people to Steve Arata up there up at Bass Lake, and Ashley and Kevin from the Eastern Madera County Fire Safe Council. And what was crazy about the story was the proximity, and we showed the contrast in the episode. If you didn't get it, if you didn't see the episode, please go watch it on Valley PBS YouTube channel. But the Forest Service and the Eastern Madera Fire Safe Council conducted fuel treatments or fuels reduction programs literally right next to each other, within
a half mile, not a mile, within a half mile at the bottom of Basore Road. And what that did was it gave us this wonderful example and contrast to show you how the private sector and the federal government do the same job on the same piece of dirt. And the federal government's job looks like crap, looks like a half-done, piles left everywhere, not even a great job of removing fuels. Like it just looked like crap. And then the treatment that Ashley and her team did, the Fire Safe Council did, with other partners, looks like a park.
And that's been going on for a long time. They just, I remember 15, 20 years ago, I got a strong discussion with the Forest Service doing a thinning sale, and when they would just cut them into 5-foot links and leave them all over the ground. They would roll with this, and you could not walk through it.
Yeah. And
they didn't even pile them. They just could not walk through it. And so you had just that fuel load right on the ground. That's all it amounted to. It got it from the air to the ground. And it was, I felt, of zero effect.
Yeah.
And
what'd they tell you when you yelled at them?
Oh, that's the way the contract was written. That was, in other words, we've always done it that way. And that's what we're going to do. Now we're going to talk about that.
So frustrating.
I know it. And then they were blaming it on the Air Quality Control Board.
Oh, yeah.
We can't do pile burning, at certain times. But was interesting, and they did have a pushback from the Air Quality Control. I agree with that.
I know, but Mother Nature's Air Quality Control Board has had something else to say about it.
But what really I think changed that attitude was what's called the rough fire, and that came along, and that smoke hung over Fresno, right over the roof of the Air Quality Control Board for a month.
Yeah.
And after that, they start thinking, well, maybe we got to loosen this up and not charge them so much per acre doing that. And what I can verify that is that I know the people that are on that board. And I was taking Dr. Alex Sharifov, who's I know professionally as a doc, and we're riding along, and I asked that, did your mind change when that smoke on that rough fire hung over here? She says, absolutely. And so those small steps, and that was quite a while ago, and those small steps are what get us get the pendulum swinging back the other way. There's many more we can talk about, but that was one of them from back then that made a big difference. The other one, remember we got up, the bark beetles are taking over, and all they are is a bark beetle, just an opportunistic parasite. And they just take advantage of what they're given.
Yep.
And so they multiply like crazy. So if you went over and sprayed all the bark beetles, you would do absolutely no good. And it's all ecosystem based.
Yeah.
And it all has to be in the balance as nature intended, and what I consider is pre-1850.
Yeah,
and
that's right. That's right. It's interesting. You talk about the rough fire and this. Again, here we are with another tough lesson that as humans we're learning on this evolutionary, timeline that we're on. And you would think that people would, and there's people listening to this right now that are super frustrated by this discussion because there's a lot of folks that called this. They knew it was going to happen. They said if you remove the logging industry and you remove timber and thinning the forest and raking the forest and all the stuff that we make, sometimes people make fun of, no, it actually works. And if to hear the air district, the Clean Air Board people say, oh, wait a second, yeah, I guess if we do light some little fires every once in a while up in the mountains, that's better than a catastrophic, giant, climate-changing event like a megafire. And that's, and it's like, it's almost like you have to bump your nose into the wall to know there's a wall there.
And there was another lesson on the rough fire. That was a lightning hit way down the bottom of the Kings, Middle Fork of the Kings River. And Deb and I remember when that popped. I mean, it was hitting lightning, not just there, all over. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they let that cook for a month.
I know.
And thinking that it was up against a bunch of rocks, and it was hot and dry then, way hot and dry. Yeah. And first thing you know, some wind came up, and that thing started laddering right up the moss on the rocks and lit it off, and that's where it went to town.
People forget that there are giant, and this is why I got so frustrated back on the Garnet Fire. I got pretty hot, and I put the Forest Service in my sights pretty hardcore, and in particular with the Forest Supervisor. And I've always grown up loving the Forest Service. I've said this on Talk of the Hill. I've always been in deep admiration of the Forest Service because as a kid growing up at Bass Lake, I always looked up to the Forest service firefighters I saw. I remember as a kid growing up, I went to Bass Lake Elementary, and right next to the school was a guy named Craig Pinkerton who lived there, who was a well-known local firefighter, Forest Service firefighter for many years. And I used to see his green fire truck parked out there when we get out of school sometimes, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world, So it's not that we've got a thing for the Forest Service in a negative way. We're rooting for them. We want them to do the right thing. But that Garnet fire started very close to the original ignition point of the Rough fire. And the similarities between the Garnet fire and the Rough fire are many, in that we didn't really go after it right away, and we paid a price on both of them.
Yeah, and it was in an area that was going to burn no matter what. There was brush higher than your two-story house in there, and it was choked. And it gets to the point where brush is so bad that the mammals, the deer, for instance, they expend more energy going through their little routes in the brush than they do gain from the grazing that they get.
Right.
And so they just don't go there.
Yeah, otherwise they'll die.
It becomes a nutrition negative.
Yeah, it's a caloric deficit for them.
Right. And so it was going to burn, but the problem is that it burns so darn hot and cooks everything, and then gets out of control and producing. You're spending $150 to $300 million.
Have you seen the Garnet fire? Let's talk about the Garnet fire, because that impacted you directly.
Directly.
Yeah, we were all, everybody who knows you and knows your pack operation up there and where your property was. I talked about you a lot on our Talk of the Hill updates we were doing. We were all watching and worried for you. Take me through what you saw, because you were sitting up there, that thing's coming at you, and you're seeing this fire not being handled properly. I think that's fair to say. Take me through. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but take me through what you saw.
They were trying to handle it in a very handicapped way, because the terrain's so steep and those guys are running dozers down there, and it's like, oh my God, just, I worry for their safety.
Right.
And because they wanted to save Tea Kettle, the experimental range there. It's 3,000 acres there. And that's down the hill from me. Yep. But the fire kept marching towards us. So we got all our cows on the north side of McKinley Grove Road, because they figured that was the last stop. They were gonna hold the line there. And secondly, I was worried, but I wasn't freaked, because I'm right across the street from PG&E headquarters. Right. That's the last thing they want to do, is let that place torch up.
Yep.
So and all the Wishon store people, we're right there in a triangle. Yep. And I have to admit, they knocked themselves out. So what they did is they wisely went up and down McKinley Grove Road, buffered that out as far as a tree, buffer zone, and to get out to 300 feet, I think, on each side.
Got it.
Mainly the downhill side, meaning the burn side. Yeah. And then they masticated and chopped and hauled off. But they had so much chipping that they hauled it and piled it higher than 2.5 stories high, and they could not give it away. They couldn't get rid of it. So that was an issue. Because
I got a question for you real quick.
Sure,
it just popped in as you're describing this. So under the duress of time and fear and emergency, the Forest Service was able to get masticators and sawyers and everybody down in there, and in like 3 days they were able to completely clean up McKinley Grove Road on 300 feet on either side, with the clock ticking and a fire coming at them. Why couldn't they just do that 2 years ago?
Money.
And take their time.
Money.
What, isn't it more expensive to put out a fire
100%.
than it is to go
Nobody
do a field
says
treatment?
This has to make sense.
Yeah, no,
It has to do with fire budget,
Yeah.
and that's where their money comes from, which is sad, because then it's like you're spending money too late. You're spending a whole lot more than you needed to.
Yeah.
So that's where they're getting, and that's what you see the logging still going on until it snowed recently. Is that's all salvage money from the fire cleanup effort, and that's why you see those logging trucks kept running down the hill.
Some of those logs that caught on fire still have some market value to them.
And they got to get them quick, because within a year and a half, 2 years, they're worthless.
Right.
And so that, but it was interesting, because I was there on site, like I said. We were under evac advise, and we said, we're not leaving. We got all our cows here and our horses here, and we're not going. And they can't make you leave. Once you leave, they can prevent you to come back. But they do have a certain form that we can sign as permittees that allows us to get through a roadblock. Sometimes you have to be escorted, but it works.
Yeah.
You know, and so we can go back and forth if we need to, as long as it's reasonably safe.
Did your cattle all come in, or were they?
No, we gathered them
Okay.
and pushed them into a safe area. And they were fine.
And you were able to truck them out of there beforehand?
Oh, yeah.
Did you think you were going to lose your place up there?
No,
You
I
felt
was
pretty
confident.
good about it?
I felt we're fine. Now we can talk about that because I took it upon myself and not waited for the forest. I took it upon myself to clear out. I did like 60 plus trees from around my compound.
Over time?
No, really, within a year.
Okay, but that's over time.
Yeah.
That wasn't after the fire
This was like 4
started.
years. No, there's like 4. I knew a fire was coming because you have to just do the math.
Yeah.
Because where I'm at is 85% of this front country, non-wilderness, front country of the Sierra National Forest has been burnt. And so I'm that little band that goes from Wishon, Courtright, down through Dinky into Shaver that hasn't been burnt yet. Yeah. And I'm about the only thing that's left.
And us over on the Bayshore corridor.
And so
in the Sierra.
And so I knew that, and the density in the woods was out there. So we weren't, it's just a clock ticking waiting for us. So anyway, I cleaned all those up, and I had 7 burn piles. And the Forest Service was supposed to burn it, and that went on for like 4 years. They didn't do it, even though they promised to. But they don't have staff, and so finally they just said, "Alan, go burn them." So I went and burned them. And that was last spring.
Okay, so
and
they said, "You do it.
You
we
do
can't
it."
do
So
it.
I went out and torched them all off because I had a guy with a skid steer and I had water and we could watch it 24/7. It was just good timing. And if we waited 2 more weeks, we wouldn't have been able to burn it because of weather conditions because it got hot. And so anyway, when the fire command people came in, they took a look around our place and saw our little ash pile, not little, they're good size, all over, and they said, "Whoa, you guys did a lot of work to defend this place and prepare this place. No matter what," their words, "no matter what, we're saving you." That's the key to people to clear their brush away from their houses that live in the hills.
If they see somebody made an effort,
You're first on the list.
You're first on the list.
And so they even brought in more mastication and stuff and doubled my zone while they were there.
How was PG&E as a neighbor during this?
They were good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were trying, but they didn't get as much done as I did, but because they didn't have the prep done that I had.
Yeah.
But around their compound is choked. You have to kind of walk through the trees with your elbows out, and push them out of the way. And it's I mean, everybody's learning, but what you don't want to do is learn too late. And so that's why
Don't you think that's kind of happening though?
Oh yeah, of course it is. But I wanted to save our stations, because I have one at Dinky Creek. Here's a good example. I have one at my Dinky Creek station is a little 5-acre compound there, and I'm right below the hill from the fire station,
right,
which is the old sawmill, and also there, fortunately, they've done 2 different 400-acre control burns right above me, so I'm clean. I wasn't. All my buildings had metal roofs, and I was not worried. So if the fire had come up to Dinky, mine may burn, but it would burn last. Put it that way.
Yeah.
And so that was my 2 facilities. I wasn't that freaked out about them.
You have a good relationship with the Forest Service,
sure,
and have for a long time. Do you? Let's talk a little bit about. Let's kind of maybe move into the grazing aspects of this discussion a little bit. I know that you're big on that as a way to utilize those animals to keep fuels down, and to, I think what a lot of people don't realize when you see that hat or that shirt all the time that says log it, graze it, or watch it burn, and people go, graze it? What, are you supposed to just let a bunch of cows walk through the forest and they're going to eat everything? That's not how it works. There's different types of grazing, as we showed in the episode. There's, you can use browsers, which are goats, things that can climb up and eat stuff out of the trees. The goats will do a great job, right?
Yes, the goats do a great job, but they have their management issues.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work.
Tell me about that. Like, what's hard about managing a bunch of goats running through the forest?
What can go wrong, right? No, you have to fence them, and with electric fence, netting fence, and you have to move that like every 3 or 4 days, and it's just a lot of work. And then it has to, nowadays, grazers, they don't do it for meat or milk. They do it for the grazing fee. And so getting the funding to do the grazing fee is where maybe mechanical might be cheaper. See what I'm saying?
If mechanical can be used.
If mechanical, but goats can go almost vertical. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Really, yeah.
You use goats in a place where there's real steep terrain, right?
And I tried to, and still am trying with the proposal to graze the power line routes. So those are 200 feet wide, and like the one that goes from Wishan, it's 19 miles long.
Yeah,
and
those are the transmission lines, the big ones.
Correct, and that would give you a nice, clean buffer zone all the way up and down. But then it's like, who's going to pay for it? And PG&E. Then they said, no, we don't do it. We want to keep spraying with herbicides and doing manual clean. And so that is a work in progress. I'm not saying it's a dead issue, but I've got it formally in writing, wanting to do that. And same thing with Edison Company. They were all for it. But right now, they've backed off. And for whatever reason, it's hard to say. But that is one of the aspects. The cattle one is, there's been two good studies. One was most recent was a good 200-pager that came out that was peer-reviewed and scientific journal published. And the other one was done, same conclusion, that cattle decrease fuel load, was done out of UC Berkeley, of all places. And they came up with the same conclusion. And so that is where we're going, because cattle, what they'll do is, yes, they graze, but they also stomp and break up woody material so it can decompose faster. So those two things is
that's cool. I never really thought about that. That makes sense.
And they're heavy animals, and they push down and they beat stuff up. And secondly, in post-burn areas, they break up that glass veneer that you're talking about that's on top of it. They track back and forth. They don't stay in the burn areas, but they go back and forth.
They're like a big rototiller.
Because what fires do when you go out and look in post-burn areas, aside from the hugely cooked ones, but the moderate burns and less, fire jumps.
Yeah.
Any place where there's a spring, where there's a meadow and all that, it'll just jump and burn around that. So those are all micro ecosystems that cattle go to, but they have to get to them from, and that chiseling effect and churning effect that they go through helps the soil, which then helps the percolation from the rain to get in the soil.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of benefits out of that, and otherwise you're going to have overgrowth of brush.
Are there environmental lawsuits or environmental groups that try to block cattle grazing as a means to beneficially help the forest?
Oh, lots of them. And
what is their just to be fair on this?
They just don't like cows. They just don't like it.
But I mean, in court, they can't say we don't want this to happen because we don't like cows. What's their legal
they'll pick
stance?
out an element of the endangered species and hang their hat on that.
They're stepping on the yellow belly frog.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
got it.
A good example on the Garnet Fire, and I won't name a name, but I was sitting with the Forest Service representative and the dozer chief of not the driver, but the head of it, and they were looking at cutting a line down on Patterson Road, and it came up that, watch your dozer over there because there's some toad habitat over there, and
meanwhile the forest is burning.
Yeah, and my mouth dropped, and I said, he's trying to save the whole ecosystem. If a couple of toads have to sacrifice, well, that saves the whole population. Well, it didn't matter anyway because it all cooked.
It all cooked.
And so next, it went out. They went ahead and did the dozer anyway.
Yeah.
But the point is that it came up.
Yeah.
And
someone had to hear themselves say it.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. And so I'm going to ride over there in that area, in the toad area this year, and I'm just going to see if I
find some
if
petrified
they survive,
toads.
Great.
Yeah.
If they survived, wonderful. But if it killed and burnt down and cooked it 6 to 8, 9 inches, they can't go deeper than that.
No, they're done.
And so they're done. And so their whole ecosystem is adios. Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about, here we are now, what are we, 4 or 5 months, maybe coming up on 6 months after the Garnet Fire, and you dodged a bullet on that one. Mm-hmm. And I know you've been working closely with the Forest Service on the grazing issue. Are you seeing, I asked this in the episodes, 5 years after the Creek Fire, what have we seen change? And with regards to the Forest Service, the Forest Service won't talk to me. I mean, partly because I yelled at them a little bit, but even after, and I said this in episode 2, you didn't get to see it when we were previewing the episode, but in episode 2, prior to episode 2, just last week, I texted Dean Gould, and
and our relationship is stressed right now. That's a fair way of putting it. And I texted him and I said, hey, I still want to give you a shot to have a voice in this episode, even though you and I aren't sending Christmas cards to each other right now. And I still think it's the right thing to do, which is, reach out to you and say, hey, would you like to comment on this? However, I don't have a ton of time. We are putting this together quick. And he texted me back. And I was, first of all, surprised that he did, and I was happy that he did. And he said, I can't talk to you until you submit all your questions in writing, and then we send those to USDA back in D.C. And then once they're approved, then I can sit down and talk with you. And I said, well, A, that doesn't work for our timeline because we're trying to move pretty quick here. And B, even if we weren't moving quick, I wouldn't accept those conditions. It's like, let's just man to man sit down and have a conversation. And so what has been your POV, your perspective on the Forest Service post Garnet fire?
Okay, what's going on at the Garnet fire before what I'm going to tell you was just another fire, and we're not getting anywhere. We're not learning anything.
Yeah.
But I've got an interesting call from Washington, and to me this is a game changer. And I won't. There's not that big a deal to go through how he got my name and number.
That's fine.
But he says, you're the only guy I know in California that's a rancher. And this particular guy's name's Lane Baumgartner. And he is the senior advisor to the chief of the Forest Service, Tom Schultz. And he is appointed by President Trump. Okay? And he also was appointed to him in Trump's first term. And Lane is a cattle rancher like me, and much bigger than I, because he has homegrown, did it all on his own. He has 3 separate ranches, all 3 with allotments in 3 different states.
Wow.
And so he has 8 kids. They're grown, and he's rocking it. And so he called me, and then that's where the ball started running, and we've gotten to be friends. I talk to him like weekly.
That's cool.
And whether it's phone, whether it's
what
text,
a contact to have.
Oh yeah. And so
well, you're getting some good intel from this.
Oh, absolutely. So because of the administration that we have, the stars are finally aligning up. I've been waiting for 45 years for the stars to line up.
In what way?
In the way that the directive through Rollins,
Brooke Rollins, the USDA secretary,
appointed by Trump,
yep,
as well as Tom Schultz, appointed by Trump, as well as Lane, appointed by Trump, have come down with a directive that, this is a directive, not a cookbook checkbox how to do it. This directive is open up, increase cattle grazing, and increase, there's a lot of vacant allotments, ones that don't have cows. Fill in those vacant allotments for 2 reasons, with cattle, for 2 reasons. Is that we want to decrease the fuel load in the forest so we don't have these catastrophic, at least help us
Isn't it amazing
prevent.
that we're hearing that from the government?
And secondly, increase the domestic beef supply.
There you go.
So we aren't getting beef from Argentina. And so that is the push. And now, they didn't purposely give us a cookbook, check the box, how do you do this? They said, that's your directive, figure it out.
Figure it out.
And I have stuff from him that's in writing that says that innovation is leadership. Yeah. And we are not interested in people who are not innovative and want to do things the same old way. Those folks have no place working at the U.S. Forest Service.
Man, oh man.
That is heavy. That is heavy. And so I sit down with Dean. I talk with Dean probably once every week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I said, this is, and then finally, there's some aspect that maybe Alan's just full of crap and he's just talking. Well, anyway, they all went to Washington. The Sierra, not Sierra, but just Sierra, but all the Forest Service supervisors.
All the forest supervisors.
Went to Washington for a group meeting.
Yeah.
And then, Dean got called in singularly and met Lane one-on-one, say, hey, you were talking to my friend Dr. Clyde out here. And so that which is good. I love that. And Lane was totally open with me on that he was going to do that.
Yeah.
And so, and Dean got a good rapport with Lane.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. And so
Perfect.
that they see that we're on. So And actually, you would be a little bit more surprised that Dean really is not negative on all of this. This is stuff but he was always stifled. See what I mean?
I get that, by the way. I get that. And for those that, we haven't really publicly talked a lot about it specifically, but, my temperature has obviously dropped a lot from I was pretty pissed off during the Carnet fire, because it was another, and I talk about this in episode 1 of the Creek Fire 5-year thing, which is there's no matter what, up until the Carnet fire, whether that's going to change now or not with this new national firefighting agency that's been developed, that from what I understand is going to take firefighting out of the hands of the Forest Service at some point. Until that's on the ground.
Well, it doesn't really take it out of the Forest Service. What it takes it out is out of the local control. It has an oversight that, in other words, each forest supervisor can't say, no, we're not going to do that fire. No. A different organization calls the shots.
Okay. Well, but this is my point I'm getting to is this jurisdictional divide between who fights a fire and who doesn't. And I've always thought that the irony was so stark with California in particular, because CAL FIRE is the world's most competent, funded, and equipped firefighting agency on the earth. It is. That's not a bold statement. It is. Go look at run the numbers on it. And yet they sat on the sidelines for all intents and purposes for the first couple weeks of the Garnet fire, because it was a quote unquote Forest Service fire. And me and a lot of other people are just sick of this jurisdictional divide. The people don't give a shit about whose dirt it is. Go put it out. Get your act together, get everybody together, and go put it out. But there's this thing about, I don't know how many times I've heard from people that were in the room of morning briefings when there is a dual response or a cooperative fire where CAL FIRE is in there with the Forest Service, and these guys are yelling at each other. It's down to the personal level of almost going to blows in morning briefings. We got to get away from that.
And I think we are. I think that's been heard clear to Washington.
Yeah.
And not only the Forest Service and is that they're combining Forest Service and BLM. And because they're as far as grazing, as fire, all
they are.
Stuff.
So is there a consolidation? How does
that hasn't come out in written in stone yet?
I
but
get
it's
it,
on its way.
But if you're talking to guys like what's your contact's name again?
Lane.
If you're talking to guys like Lane, you're getting pretty good indications of what's coming down the pipeline.
Right. And he says it's epic.
Yeah, it's epic changes.
Epic changes. That's his words.
And Department of Interior is probably going to play into this, I would think.
Department of Interior, and believe it or not, Department of Interior and Forest Service are kind of joined at the hip. Even though one's interior and one's ag, it's amazing how connected they are.
No, I get that. And like the Forest Service was originally developed because, and why it's under agriculture is because it was in charge of managing a resource, which was the trees. That's why it was one of the main reasons why it was started. And so we don't do that anymore. We don't do timber sales anymore because every Tom, Dick, or Harry environmental attorney can block it. We're going to get into this on another show, and I don't want to go into it too far right now, but I will give you, the listeners and you a little tease. I met someone recently who's got some really good information, has done a ton of research on the system that we now live under, that will show you, and we will show you when we sit down to do this, that environmental groups like the John Muir Project or the Sierra Club, they actually get paid to sue the Forest Service to stop timber sales and fuels reduction projects under NEPA.
Right, and I could probably name who you were talking to, but the point is that the Equal Access to Justice Act is what is seriously being looked at by Congress now.
It needs to,
and because that's what funds all this.
Because it's and I probed into that. I go, wait a second, within NEPA, which is the environmental part of this, within that. There's actually it's prescribed in it's codified. It's in there that if I'm an environmental group, I learn of a timber sale, even if I think the timber sale's
not that bad and probably beneficial. I'm going to sue the Forest Service because I might stop the timber sale, but just by suing, I automatically, whether I win or lose, I automatically get my legal fees repaid to me by the federal government. We got to get out of that deal.
And the way that is, and actually it was Ed Cole, prior Forest Supervisor, that brought this up and gave it to me in print, how that was written. And for instance, if an environmental group sues for on 10 counts to stop something, they lose 9 but win 1, it says right in the language, they shall get their reimbursement for their legal fees. Shall. Not 10% and not maybe. They shall. And so that is what the Congress's committees are looking at and reviewing now.
Change that one word.
Work on that. And to where, otherwise right now the judges are handcuffed. They're forced to give this.
No, the judges, it's not up to the judge.
It's not up to the
judge. It's
in
in the prescribed law.
Right. And so that has to be addressed.
Think about that for a second, folks. So if you're listening to this and you're going, wait a second, what did Jeff and Alan just say? I just said, and Alan supported, that if an environmental agency or environmental group wants to sue, it's a business. Why wouldn't they sue? They get paid to sue. So the Forest Service is trying to do the right thing on the ground with fuels reduction and timber sales. And an environmental group like the John Muir Project will come along and sue them the minute that gets posted or made into public information. And no matter what the outcome is of that lawsuit, the John Muir Project is not on the hook for anything. They're going to be reimbursed 100% of their legal fees for bringing that lawsuit by the government that they're suing.
Correct. And that original law, EAJA, was made with good intentions, actually. It was made for mom and pop ranchers and farmers that say, hey, I'm being wronged over here. I'm going to go pursue legal action against it. And what happened is it got out of hand. And then it became a cottage industry. So environmental law is big now. There's groups all over the United States just doing this.
I wonder how much money we spend every year paying environmentalists
I don't even want to know.
To help us ruin our environment.
I don't even want to know. But I do think, back to the current administration, they're
looking at it.
They're looking at it as well as a whole different perspective because of the Creek Fire up here. Then B, the big one that got the attention was the Palisades Fire.
Yeah.
And that got national attention. It got Trump down there. And I don't know if you remember seeing when Mims went there and they were meeting with Trump. And then Deb and I noticed, there's Randy Moore sitting there with his Forest Service uniform. And I thought, first of all, he's not going to say a word. And secondly, he's not going to be around long. Sure enough, he didn't say a word. In 2 weeks, he retired.
Yeah.
And because he knew that he was the focus of so much.
Yeah.
And I've met him and talked to him one-on-one. That's another story.
Yeah.
And it's so focused now. Now getting back to Lane up in Washington, Lane said verbally that he wanted to come out here and ride with me up here.
It's awesome.
And then to cement that isn't just talk, because he sent me the stuff to fill out that I sign and I set up. So in other words, it has to be by request from a constituent so that he can put it through to justify flying out.
Yep.
And he wants to ride around and do that. And so absolutely, I'm going to
come on
do
out.
That. Absolutely. And it's the type of focus and attention on the real problems and coming up with real workable solutions that are actually obviously going to be benefit to the environment.
I'll tell you what, this has been a fascinating talk. I want to start winding it down here a little bit, but I want to transition out of the forest management stuff, and I want to talk a little bit about your books, and I want to ask you a little bit about what inspired you to write these books. And man, you've lived. You've got a lot of trail miles under your belt up in the high country.
And the trail miles are an advantage, and I'll tell you why. It's because, think about it. I take people in, I'm coming back empty.
Yeah.
So I'm in that saddle a lot of time by myself.
Oh, yeah.
And equally, I take people's stuff only in and stuff only out. And I'm in the whole day or multiple 2 days, I'm by myself. So I think of all these storylines, all the stuff that happened. And thank God I have Deb, who has a good memory. She says, you got to talk about that case. You got to talk about that. So it came up where I thought, I'm just going to write this book. And so I wrote it, Life Lessons on the Sierra Trail. And it's kind of a unique twist, but it's not just about how to manage the forest, because I do talk about that. Yeah. But it's like how people get out of their comfort zone, and some react in a great way, and some make dumb decisions. And I do a lot of search and rescue stuff, talk about it. And I do, and it's hopefully there's something in there for everybody. And that's why I wrote it. And so then I finished that. I thought, okay, I'm done.
I wrote my book.
And then I started thinking, and Deb was saying, you didn't talk about this. And what about that? So I wrote book 2. I wrote part 2.
I love it.
And basically it's about a guy named, a kid who, you'll get into it, but he comes back and he rides with me all summer. And so what you're doing is, the reader is doing, is listening to our conversation as we ride down the trail. That's really what it amounts to.
What a cool
deal. And each day, each trip is different, so each chapter has its own unique. So you could read 3 chapters, put it down, come back a month later, start chapter 4. Not miss a thing.
They're sort of self-contained.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just 3 characters, this guy named Pablo, and then Deb and I. That's basically it. And each story has its own build. And so anyway, I did book 2, and which is where Pablo comes back the second summer.
Oh.
See, he was an at-risk kid starting at Fresno State, and it kind of got his head together the first year. Second year, he's coming back. He's still going to Fresno State. And it goes through, my publisher, make sure you talk about the Creek Fire.
Was he a client? Or was he, did he help? Okay, gotcha. Okay, we'll leave that part out.
Yeah.
But anyway, you spent time with him.
Yeah. But anyway, he worked for me.
That's what I'm saying.
Kid, yeah. And so anyway, the last chapter, I hit the Creek Fire, because my publisher definitely was, you got to talk about the Creek Fire. Yeah. And so I did. And it's a different perspective, but it's just us looking at it, like I said, riding down the trail, or reflecting and talking about all the different factors on human decisions. And it's I think you find it entertaining.
I think a lot of people will find it entertaining. I'm looking forward to getting some time where I can dive into it. I've got some plane travel coming up. We're starting to shoot outside Beyond the Lens again, so I'll be jumping on the plane here again. And I like to look.
Well,
I like to
I'm going to
read.
plug a couple of bookstores. Clovis Book Barn, and as well as Barnes & Noble over in Fresno by Fashion Fair, or most people get it on Amazon.
Tell people the titles of the book again.
The easiest way to find it really is just type in my name. So
go to Amazon and type in Alan Clyde.
2 L's and an E, Allen Clyde, and both books will pop right up.
Both books will
That's
pop
the
up.
fastest way.
And you can get hard copies
they're all
locally.
They're all
here.
paperback.
They're all paperback.
Yeah, nowadays it's really cost prohibitive for publishers to do hard copy.
I hear you.
Yeah, and but anyway, that's it. Kind of fills your spec. Just yesterday at our board meeting, there was a superstar girl, 8th grader, who loves to write, and I said, "Oh my God, just keep writing. You may not even publish it, but you get it written down, your soul is at rest."
It is. People don't understand that, what you just said. If you're not a writer, you don't understand. Some people have trouble understanding what you meant by what you just said. I knew immediately what you said. When you're a writer, and I write a lot, everything you hear me say on TV, I write, and sometimes you have to get it. You can't rest, or you can't fully relax until you've committed it to paper or to the computer screen. You have to give it life by physically giving it life, by typing it.
And then it becomes life.
That's I guess what I'm trying to say poorly. But it becomes, and there's a release. There's like a feeling of like, oh man, I got that out, and now I won't forget it, or it won't change, and I hit it the right way. It's interesting that you put it that way. I find that really cool.
That is a phenomenon, and you'll get into it so deep that Deb will tell you that. I mean, I'd start at 7 in the morning, and I won't even look up at the clock. Oh, it's 6 at night.
It goes by.
It just flies by. And you say, no, I'm just going to write. And you do a word count. That's almost right.
Yeah.
They set a word count. And so I'm just going to do 1,000 words. First thing you know, you've done 2,500.
Yeah.
And
especially if you're loving what you're doing.
You're into it. Oh, yeah. You keep thinking of new stuff all the time. Anyway, that's
I got to ask you this, since we're talking about the backcountry and everything, and people are going to be mad at me if I don't ask this. And I mean this dead serious. Bigfoot.
Excuse me.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh. You're
No,
hurting my feelings. Do you believe in the possibility of a large bipedal North American ape species living amongst us?
No.
Okay. Yeah. You've never seen anything up there that made you think that?
Not anything that even remotely suggested it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say they're all bears up on their hind feet. Yeah. I am just not. I have absolutely
you're not there.
Zero evidence, physical or in my mind, that there's anything of that type out there. There's been no fossils, no nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about a lot of this from a doctor.
Yeah, no, I get it. You're a scientific man.
Yeah, and so I have to see stuff that's tangible before I'll start biting on it.
It's true. There's lots of good. I mean, every time. I mean,
it is fun to think about.
Well, I'm a hopeful. I call myself a hopeful believer, right? Because like you, I'm very scientific and very analytical. But I also like Jane Goodall, the world famous anthropologist that just passed away, and so it's like. She believed in the possibility of them. And I go back and I look at, there are large ape species in the Congo that weren't known to be real until 30 years ago. The panda bear was thought to be mythological for 1,500 years until they saw one. And so stuff like that makes me go, man.
Yeah, but they're in areas that have very little to zero exploration.
Yeah, I know.
And they're isolated communities, so you have to put giant question marks.
I know, man.
But up here it's different.
But you haven't had an experience.
Zippo.
Okay, how about wolves? Because that's another hot topic right now in California. And you're a cattleman, so you saw the wolf thing that we did with American Grown, and we know we've got game camera footage, knowing we've got wolves in our area.
Right here, so far, and this is not going to hold forever, but so far they're pass-through animals.
They're pass-through right now. Dispersers, they call them.
Yeah, they go on down to the Indian reservation, Tulare County.
Tulare County.
And so fortunately that I know of. You see, when you run your cows out, even on my foothill ranch and then up the high country, you're not with them every day. You don't see everything, and you find a carcass, maybe one or two a year. But you don't know if coyotes got them, bears got them, or they just died.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do an autopsy on them.
Well, you need to do those pretty quick.
Within a week, they're gone
everything
anyway.
else is going to eat them.
Yeah. And so they become, and I kind of think that's a percent loss. And coyotes and bears got to eat too. You can't be that selective. I mean, they're out. You're in their neighborhood.
Right.
So that's kind of where I look. Before we get too far, the bit about the forest and health and all that, that's not going to happen overnight. That is going to take many decades to get us back to what I consider pristine pre-1850.
It's a long game.
And it's going to be like 2 generations minimum to start seeing this. But really, why we do that is so we do it for our grandchildren. So that they can go up and see that and see what it was really like and see it's the way it's supposed to be, and hopefully thank us for having the courage to make it happen.
I love that. What a great note to end on. Dr. Alan Clyde, thanks for being with me today, man. This is not the last time we're going to hang out and talk.
Anytime you want.
I mean, people don't realize this, but Alan and I talk on the phone at least 3 or 4 times a month, I would say. Yeah, we just catch up, talk to each other, and I enjoy our time together. I think you're a great guy, and it's nice to get to meet your wife today. You brought her in, which is cool, and I think I've met her before, though.
You have?
Yeah, I have met her before, but good to see her again. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. Not only are you a great member of our community, giving of your time to the school boards that you've been a part of, providing people for generations with lots of enjoyment and exposure and introduction into the high country through your pack business. You're being able to pack up there, doing your cattle work, but you're also just a great, I think, a great voice for reason in our area, and I appreciate you.
And thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that's really, sure, we could, yell and scream, beat on drums, but you got to get in it and figure out solutions and figure out a way to make them happen. Yeah. That's what I enjoy doing.
That's the secret sauce. All right, folks. Jeff Aiello here with Dr. Alan Clyde, and another great episode, another great podcast of Talk of the Hill. We'll catch you next time, and keep listening, keep being a part of Talk of the Hill, everybody. Thanks a lot.